Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Talking Elite Fitness. Sean Woodland and Tommy Marquez here with you. Lauren Khalil is enjoying some much-deserved time off with her family in North Carolina, probably on a beach right now, not thinking about anything other than just getting some sun and some relaxation. So,
Yep.
And you are up in Canada.
I am. I'm in beautiful Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Lovely. Never been there. Hear great things.
Home to the Stanley Cup finalist Edmonton Oilers.
The Eskimos, the CFL team, punting on third down, making a mockery of our great game.
Home of Grit Distribution and Project Grit.
There you go. We're kind of in our journey now to kind of get back to normal with our publishing schedule and content and things like that after everything that's happened the past couple of weeks. And obviously more continues to happen and more has happened. So we are going to get you caught up on that. And then later on in the show, I'm going to be talking with Bob Jennings, who is one of the men who is one of the, I guess you'd call key organizers or key figures behind the Masters CrossFit Games Legends Championship. Masters CrossFit Games, of course, next week in Birmingham, Alabama, and our entire crew will be there along with our good friend Chase Ingram to bring you all the action live. So really looking forward to that. And we'll be talking to Bob about the event and just some other things that I think that are top of mind right now for a lot of the athletes. But before we jump into anything, we want to thank our sponsor for today, and that is Thirdy, the collagen-based drink powder that helps with joint and connective tissue repair and has other ingredients like magnesium, L-theanine, and GABA that are included to help calm your central nervous system and support deep and REM sleep. This stuff tastes great. I look forward to taking it every night, and it has absolutely made a gigantic difference in the quality of my sleep. If you use Thirdy, you will get to sleep more quickly, you will sleep better, and you will feel more refreshed when you wake up in the morning. It has been an absolute game changer for me. I need more, got to get more sleep, but it has helped me optimize the sleep that I do get. And I know, Tommy, that your sleep game is about to be interrupted significantly here in the coming months. So I know that you will have a greater appreciation for Thirdy as you get to that date and beyond.
No doubt. And, even when I'm on the road, like it's, you have the little pouch where you can put like knickknacks and things like that in your suitcase. Like there's a permanent pouch for the black bag of Thirdy that has all the little travel servings. They just stay in there 24/7. Every time I get a re-up, I do it. And I think the erratic schedule of travel is going to be a light prep for the erratic schedule that I'm going to have once this kid comes. But thankfully, Thirdy doesn't have melatonin in it, so I can take it and get high quality sleep, even if it's in short chunks, because the little one needs some feeding.
It absolutely works. And you can get 20% off Thirdy right now by using the code TEF. 20% off, go to Thirdy.com, enter that code TEF, and you will improve your sleep and your recovery. Take it from us. They are absolutely great people who make a fantastic product, and we're glad that they are on board. Thirdy.com, use the code TEF.
And if you're in Birmingham, you'll be able to get to come and try some samples and stuff like that at Jason Grubb's Boulder Athlete booth.
There you go.
So,
yes, I will. That's the first thing that I will be packing for my trip. Great state of Alabama to witness the Masters CrossFit Games. Really looking forward to that, and I think it's going to be good for the community to kind of get back to watching live competition. I know we're going to have to kind of trudge our way out of this, but this is going to be the first step to doing that.
Sure.
Main thing we wanted to talk about today is what happened yesterday. And that is the PFAA released a statement, and they put it up on Instagram, and it is on the screen right now. And in this statement, they made 3 demands. The first, and I'll read it verbatim, we demand an appropriate level of transparency between CrossFit and the PFAA regarding their third-party investigation as to the death of Lazar Djukic and subsequent changes made to protect all athletes going forward. That is a bit, I guess that's a bit nebulous because I don't know what an appropriate level of transparency would be. I guess that is for them to judge whether or not CrossFit is being open enough, but
sure,
not a surprise.
No.
The second one, We demand CrossFit create an independent safety team to liaise with the PFAA on an ongoing basis. Okay, that is something more concrete that you can say that is pretty much more objective as to whether or not it has been accomplished. CrossFit agrees, say we're going to do that. We're going to do that. Here's the team. Probably the PFAA might have some input on that, and that's assuming CrossFit is open to this. Now, the third one is the one that has caused the most consternation within the community, and I think has really divided people into one camp or the other. And the third one is we demand that Dave Castro be removed from his position in the sport team. These demands reflect the immediate steps necessary to begin to restore athlete trust in CrossFit sport. The PFAA is also acutely aware that more must be done to change the culture and strategic direction of the sport to ensure its future, and that will take time. And it's signed the PFAA board. That's Annie Thorisdottir, Brent Fikowski, Dinah Swift, Fee Sagaffi, Laverne Engelbrecht, Patrick Vellner, Royce Dunn, and Victoria Campos. What was your reaction to that?
I guess my initial reaction was like, oh, okay, they're actually like coming out and starting to make some demands and making their stance known on like some actual change that they want to have happen. The other part of that was like, my other reaction was like, I wish we got a little bit more explanation as to why, but I also understand that in these scenarios, part of what's presented to the public is really kind of like the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the information that is actually being exchanged between parties and what actually exists out there that supports their position, right? Because the reality is that there is an ongoing investigation, around the circumstances that happened with Lazar. There is ongoing conversations between parties and stuff that's being said that's not in public right now, and out of whether it's respect to the process or the whatever decorum that you want to maintain between parties, like that, not all of that information is just going to be handed out publicly, right? That's just the nature of it, whether the public demands it or whether the public wants it or feels entitled to it or whatever. Like the information that's going to get out there, the information that is going to get out there is going to be what the athlete, as like the athlete organization as a party, wants out there, what CrossFit wants out there in terms of what they release, what the family wants, and going forward. And that's not always going to be satisfactory to those of us in the media that are trying to get all the information out like accordingly to present our cases and opinions, and then the people that are just sitting home at their, whether it's the people that are 100% behind the athletes no matter what, the people that are behind HQ no matter what, the people that are behind Dave no matter what. And I just keep going back to, and this has been true the entirety since I was working in this space, whether it was volunteering, working for CrossFit directly in the years since. There is so much more information than what that exists and is real and that supports the movements and stances taken by these athletes or any party involved in this than what people see and what people will ever know, right? And so my initial reaction was like, oh, this is going to cause more squabbling online, and
it has.
And it has, and no surprise, and it's going to cause people being like, I defend Dave 100%, or athletes no matter what, and like I guess that's kind of the state of play nowadays with this like instant gratification, instant information, sense of entitlement type ecosystem that speaking digitally online creates, right? But yeah, that was, and then just knowing that that's what's going to happen, and then kind of being like, well, hope more info comes out.
Well, you asked a question about some people saying, okay, well, why?
Yeah.
And in that, I believe in the post that the PFAA put up, they also linked to an article on men's health that was released at the same time as the statement. And to get the full picture, you need to read both. You need to read the statement, and then you need to read the article, or really the letter, I guess you would call it, that Brent Fikowski wrote that appeared in Men's Health. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read, there's two paragraphs that I think really shed some light on the why. And they're towards the bottom here. I have them on the screen. And I'll read this verbatim here for those that are listening. If CrossFit Inc. feels that director of the CrossFit Games, Dave Castro, has a role in affiliates and training, they're welcome to keep him in that role. When it comes to the sport team, this breach of trust regarding the death of Lazar, even during the weekend of the games, there was more than one incident that represented a consistent pattern of behavior in which we felt that he's communicated to us one message and then subsequently presented to the public a different message. Along with that, the willingness to cooperate, the willingness to communicate with athletes on an individual basis, on a collective basis, and a collective basis with the PFAA, it hasn't been there. Looking ahead, so many large changes need to happen. We don't feel like those can happen with Dave Castro as part of the sports team. We want a sport where there's an where there's an expectation that they want you to push hard. We want you to go as fast as possible, and we're going to create a safe environment for you to do that. And if you maybe get overheated, or if you're struggling in the water, we're going to be there for you. If you tear your hands, we're going to have someone there to help patch you up. That's the expectation, and that feels like the lowest expectation that we could ask for from this competition. We're not asking for free snacks, right? The next level to that is we want to figure out who the best is. You don't need to hurt us or put us through more than is necessary to sort us from first to last. We don't need to do 10,000 reps when 1,000 reps would be appropriate. So it's really, I think, those two paragraphs, coupled with everything that athletes have been saying publicly for a long time, that I think gives you the why behind why the PFAA is asking for Dave to be removed from the sport team, not completely from the organization, as they stated, as Brent stated in that letter. He can keep his position with the affiliates. But I think from the athlete's perspective, and I'm not saying that I agree with this or anything, but given the people I've talked to and given the things that I've seen and heard, I think the why is we are tired of this pattern of behavior that we have seen year over year over year. And the only way we feel this gets better is for Dave to be out of the equation. You can disagree with that or agree with that, but I think that is the reason behind it. And this, the death of Lazar Djukic, I think just poured a significant amount of gasoline on a fire that was already smoldering and just accelerated this thing to the point where the PFAA and the athletes who are within that organization just feel like this is now the only option left to them. And this is, they feel probably, I'm guessing, that this is the best time for them to make this demand.
Yeah, this, and to kind of reiterate that, like whether it's been said publicly, like privately, this has been an issue for a lot of athletes for a long time.
Now, whether or not that falls in Dave's lap, people can argue, but
sure,
we're just talking about why the PFA is doing this now.
Yeah, this is not a new issue. I know there are a lot of people that might be new here, or have only started in the sport the last few years, or even like post 2018, season overhaul. This has been something that has been in discussion for quite some time. A lot of athletes, and I understand a lot of people have very personal feelings about it, whether they maintain personal relationships with people in the sport, Dave included, and that guides their thinking, or people have very personal relationships in the other direction, right? Like they don't have those, and that guides their thinking, regardless of what ultimately comes out, because there's a lot more information, a lot of facts, data, behavior, things that can come out. This has been brewing for the larger part of 12, 13 years.
Yeah, it's been more than a decade.
Yeah, over
and
a
I
decade, for sure.
Think too, and rightfully so, people are asking, okay, why not just wait to the end of the investigation to figure out if you're going to make these demands? And I think from the athlete's perspective, for the ones that are advocating for this, and I don't know this for a fact, but this would be my sense, is that they would say to that, we don't need an investigation to explain the last 12 years of behavior that we have seen firsthand. And I think this incident has just said, we're tired of it and we're done with this. We know, like, I feel like they know pretty well who they want to blame for it. And yes, we should wait for the investigation needs to happen. Facts do need to come out, but I think from their perspective, they are just enough is enough, and they pretty much more or less have their minds made up based on not what happened in Fort Worth, but what has happened in Carson, Madison, Morgan Hill, that they have made up their mind about what needs to happen.
Yeah, and a lot of athletes have spoken up before, because I think one of the primary questions that comes up is like, well, why now? Why, if this has been an issue for so long, why haven't people spoken up? And it has been reiterated by multiple athletes saying that they have ultimately felt powerless in that, right? It's like they felt like there was this air of like, if we spoke up in any direction in criticism, if we provided criticism, even if it was like constructive criticism, that it would result in like immediately being ostracized, kind of shamed and attacked in a way that like ultimately affects their livelihood, right? Like, speaking with a few athletes on site, they're like, we only have a handful of chances to like really earn a living, and like the Rogue Invitational hasn't been around that long. Wadapalooza is like a big money purse, has been around, really 2017-ish, as like a significant prize option. Like Dubai around that same time, maybe a little bit earlier. So it's like there's only a handful of opportunities in this sport for athletes to earn a living and like make a name for themselves and like capitalize on the hard work that they've put in. And so if they feel like the most significant one is in the hands of like a handful of people that, can act on a whim and they have zero recourse, that is going to be a deterrent from you actually taking action and standing up. Like, that's just the nature of the imbalance of power in situations like this. It's not unique. It's not unique to CrossFit, Like, I think most people can look back across their career and realize a scenario where they felt powerless in their opportunities to make significant change to what they felt was like a work environment or a work situation that like wasn't okay, and then that's literally why collective bargaining and unions have started in the United States.
Yes, and specifically with sports as well. This is a new thing to this area, but every other sport has a players' association or has some sort of agency that represents the players' interests to the league. Like, that's nothing new. And now we're seeing that arise here in CrossFit. And the other thing that I'm wondering about, and we are working on getting a representative from the PFAA on the show here soon. That those efforts are ongoing, trying to schedule something. But the use of the word demand, not recommend, not we would like, but demand. To me, like, if you're going to use that word, you understand that there is a chance that you're going to get rejected. So you better have a backup plan in place if that happens.
Yeah.
And what is that? So if CrossFit says we're not doing this, Dave is staying, we don't need, like, let's just say it's status quo. Investigation comes out, it doesn't really tell us anything that we might not already know or think. And there's nothing concrete in there that would lead to any of these demands being met. Then what? And I think the only alternative to that is that the athletes are ready to say, okay, we're not participating. We've already seen a couple athletes post this. I think it was Jamie and Elliot Simmons who said, we're not going to participate in any CrossFit events until the changes have been made. So what is that alternative? Is that the athletes they come up with their own sort of system involving other people where they have a season that they now have an ownership in, and they, like, that's the alternative, and it just cuts CrossFit out of that equation, which means that there's the open is now, I mean, CrossFit can run the open, but it's sort of a road to nowhere.
Yeah.
So what is the alternative? And that's a question I want to ask. Like, if these demands aren't met.
Yeah. Well, in other sports or other areas of employment, that's when strikes and lockouts happen, right? And ultimately, people just decide that, you know what, we're not gonna keep pressing forward this way, and they essentially boycott, and that leads to striking, boycotting. That has always been the ultimate bargaining chip with collective bargaining from like an athlete or an employee union.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you take an entire workforce away, it starts costing the people up top money in a very significant way. That's when you can actually affect real change. So my assumption, and again, I try not to speculate. My assumption is that you would make that demand unless you're ready to take that step.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's significant that you have someone like Annie Thorisdottir signing off on that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Brent and Pat have tried to help spearhead a lot of this, and they're big names as well. But I think Annie, being the legacy athlete that she is, having her name on that, like, to me, that lends an extra level of credibility to their cause. It's like, and like, if she's putting her name on this, she doesn't
Yeah.
take this lightly.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see now what comes of this, because this is just the first thing. And as Brent alluded to in not only in the statement, but also in the article in Men's Health, this is just the beginning. Like, this feels like if these don't happen, there's no, like, that's what we need to get to the starting line to make change.
Yeah. Do you feel like they would make these demands if they didn't have a significant amount of evidence to support those demands?
I mean, yes. I think there are people on both sides of this who have their minds made up regardless.
Oh, you're talking about like the general community?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But I also, like, as Brent mentioned in the article, this is for the athletes who have been around a while. This is just nothing new to them. And I think it was this soundbite where, I think it was on Be Friendly Fitness. I think Brian Friend got it with Pat Vellner after the games, where he alluded to, we're just told we get patted on the head and told, oh, it's no big deal. And I think the line he used, like, this is sport, not war. And if you read between the lines, it's pretty clear who he's directing those comments at.
Yeah.
So I think the athletes, especially the ones who've been around, like Brent, and Pat, and Annie, think probably have had, knew that this was, like I said, just the last straw for them. And they have felt like, rightfully or not, that Dave is the guy that is the major impediment to any kind of progress here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I also say, I think, Brent and Pat and all those, that's a smart crew. So I think they have to understand that there's got to be a plan B if this doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's what I'm curious about.
Or if there's not, they're just willing to lay it on the line, and they're just True. Like at their wit's end with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure about this. The sport as we know it is going to change.
It has to.
In a very big way. Now, whether or not that's with CrossFit's involvement in it remains to be seen. Because I don't go ahead.
I think the line of thinking that would take you like, oh, nothing needs to change after what we just saw unfold is ultimately speaks to the arrogance that the athletes are complaining about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like CrossFit, obviously the third party investigation, I think John Woolley had brought up some potential keyword conflicts, but like for CrossFit to be like, in the wake of all this, to be like, no, we got this, don't worry. That's exactly the response that the athletes have been fighting against, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it puts it in a very tough position where it's like, all right, well, you, at least on some level, some of those demands to kind of prove the athletes otherwise, if you're trying to fight against the narrative that the athletes are putting, whether you believe it's right or wrong, you almost have to acquiesce to a couple of these demands.
Yeah. I mean, I think the athletes understand they have never had a stronger hand than they do now.
Mm-hmm.
And like the other question I have is how many, okay, let's say, sake of argument, that they are not satisfied. The PFAA they're not satisfied with what CrossFit does here. And they say, okay, we're out. How many are actually going to be out? And can you still run a season without the names who say that they're out? Because it's not like there's a ton of money being made here by a lot of people. Mm-hmm. There's money being made by a handful of people at the top. What about everybody else now who says, well, these guys are out now, I have a chance? And that's also assuming that the economic landscape of the sport does not change due to people, due to big names not being there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of assumptions there, but it's like how you, I guess at the end of the day, like how united are the athletes on this?
Yeah, it's tough because especially like, and let's be real, like this is still a very young sport, still very, very young.
Yeah.
And then we haven't had, and even just going through minor adjustments in the iteration of what the sports season looks like has been a massive growing pain for a lot of people. Now you think, and you have an athlete cohort that isn't as predictable as other sports in that like you have teams, and so rosters more or less, even if athletes are switching between teams, the collective whole of the athletes looks pretty similar year to year. That's tough. I just don't.
Right.
I would, based on like the feedback that we've heard, even about the athlete meeting, it's hard getting everyone on the same page.
Yeah.
But I do think that like I think it's I think what really is important is that there are athletes that have been around a long time that are echoing the concerns that the PFAA have said.
And there are other people adjacent to the athletes involved in the sport who, I've talked to off the record, and a lot of these people are level-headed, and they're done. Like they're upset. Like they're really, really done, and they're in the athletes' corners and like, no, this has got to change. Enough is enough.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, it's like also how do you view, like how does the average person view that, like whether or not there is a problem, right? Like imagine, so say for example, you say you have the 80 athletes at the games. Well, what if like 40 athletes have had this experience, this consistent experience that the PFAA is outlining, and it has been like that, but the other 40 haven't, right? And they've had a great experience, and they're like, well, does the fact that half of the people not having that experience not make the problem real anymore, right? Like it's either, is it this like all or nothing type mentality, like everyone has to have that problem for there to be a problem?
Right.
Because that doesn't sound like sound logic to me. If like, and I think this is more or less some of the realities for these athletes that are like, I've never experienced this in the sport. I've always had pleasant interactions with these people or the leadership or however, and I never had these issues. But other people can definitively say that they have had those interactions. So like, does that still make it a problem worthwhile addressing for all athletes?
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's, again, we're hoping to get someone from the PFAA on here soon in the coming days, and we'll just continue to put information out there and give some reaction to it as it comes out. But still, a lot more questions than answers. But the ball is clearly in CrossFit's court right now, and they got to figure out what they're going to do.
And it's if we're going to be honest about the sequence of events, like was it ever like detailed in depth why Dave was laid off the first time?
I don't think so. I don't think that was. I don't remember there being a statement from anybody who says these are the reasons why we have decided to make this move. It was more or less that the only thing I remember is it was mutually agreed to part or something like that, or and then Dave disputed that.
I think that was boilerplate. Like, hey, we're going to give it to make it look better on your end. We're going to offer up like the statement of like mutually agreed to part ways, so it doesn't look like we just said, oh, we fired you,
right?
Kind of scenario, which is apparently pretty common with like more like big business type stuff. But yeah,
no, but that's an interesting point. I mean, I certainly, as you did, heard things from people about why that were off the record, and a lot of people had mixed feelings about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know, but I don't know what CrossFit, they don't have a lot of leverage right now. Assuming they still want to hold on to the sports side of this and be part of it. If they are willing to just cut the sports side loose, they don't really have to do anything here, because that's an expense that they no longer need to incur. they can just say, fine, we're out of it. And then they don't have to make any changes because now there's no sport. Someone else can do it.
That would be wild.
It would be, but yeah. A lot needs to be sorted out.
What do the athletes do? Call up the IF3 the next day?
I don't know what they do, but I mean, and I know, like, there are people out there in this ecosystem who know how to run events, who know how to put them on, who are well connected, who could probably, if you got them in a room, cobble something together with the support of the athletes. Now, the problem is you can't put the word CrossFit on it. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or not right now, but it certainly has brand recognition, and the CrossFit Games have brand recognition.
Yeah.
So is it valuable to have that name still associated with? And I think there's still some value for CrossFit to be associated with it, because I think if done correctly, it's a great marketing tool. Yeah. It's a great way to get messaging out to people. It's a great way to show people that you can go do this in your affiliates. And there were some good commercials that ran during the games on ESPN that showed all kinds of people in CrossFit affiliates. Yeah, Chuck Carswell was on there. Like, they were really, really good. They accomplished the goal of showing that this can be for anybody.
At its best, the sport was a pilot hole for CrossFit to do marketing at a level that they couldn't do anywhere else.
Yes.
There is the interpersonal marketing that you get done on a very local level with affiliates and gyms and the people that you put out into the community that get healthier and happier. But at its best, the sport provided a lane for CrossFit to put marketing on network television and commercial advertising in a way that wasn't available to them previously. Mm-hmm. And that's important. That's very important, especially when you're trying to be this global tour de force and you're actively trying to compete against these narratives from people on the outside that just don't understand it. Right. Mm-hmm. It's like, how do you show those people that aren't ever going to walk into a CrossFit gym that CrossFit can be done safely and can be done in a way that benefits basically everyone to make their lives better. So but remember also at the same time, these same issues that we're talking about now is why the IF3 started. It's a big reason why they wanted to take some of the complaints and issues that had been pervasive in the sport and smooth those out in a way that makes it palatable for a potential Olympic bid. Because if you want to be an Olympic sport, you can't have all of these things that they're talking about. And they felt that there was a way to bridge the gap between them both. Mm-hmm. And it was a great idea. I mean, I would love to see CrossFit athletes competing in the Olympics. You think after everything that happened with that Australian breakdancer Ray Gun, we wouldn't want some CrossFitters out there?
Man, yeah, world meet Jason Hopper and Dallin Pepper.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
it'd be fantastic. I think there is a reason why CrossFit would still want to be involved in the sport, even if they're not running it. In my opinion, there is a way for this to work with everybody being happy, but I don't know whether or not we're going to be able to get there anytime soon. And it's going to be just based on people's willingness to want to work together.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But like I said, we are working on getting someone from the PFAA on the show as soon as we possibly can. And we are working to make that happen. Schedules are kind of hard to line up right now, but those efforts are continuing. So maybe by the time you actually listen to this, we'll have something booked. But as of now, those efforts are ongoing. So.